Welcome to this conversation here on the warning with Katie Couric, and I'm going to turn it over to you right away to get started. Katie's asking the questions.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions always. But Steve, before we start, maybe you should, I think it might be interesting for people joining us to hear a little bit about how we know each other and kind of our professional history.
Well, we go back, when did we first cross? Like in the McCain and Bush years.
Yes, I think especially during the McCain campaign.
And especially during the McCain campaign. And of course, the very famous Sarah Palin interview that you did, which, I tell people all these years later, that everything that was going on in that campaign on that day when that interview came out, it was literally the third biggest problem of the day, right? It was the global economy was collapsing.
That's right. John McCain was, Senator McCain was headed to D.C. and right for that emergency meeting. Remember, and it kind of didn't help him because he didn't seem that engaged with economic information.
It was a moment in time. I'm still waiting. I was 37 when I was doing the McCain campaign, and I'm 54 now, and I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me what the unfair question it is that you asked Katie Couric. Excuse me, that Katie Couric asked Sarah Palin, that you asked Sarah Palin. And the one thing that people really missed in that moment in 2008, you asked this question of Palin, which is, so what do you read every day? And if you're preparing somebody for any type of national interview on a presidential campaign, this is just a very early question that you go through. What do you read? What's the last book you read? Childhood pets, basic stuff. And when Sarah Palin answered that question, it wasn't that she doesn't read. It was her way of telling you to go fuck yourself, right? And so when you live by that creed, right, you see what happens. So at any rate, right, it was a grievance-based answer. And I remember when the campaign ended and Republicans are out of power, and really the locus of the Republican Party switches to 6th Avenue in New York. Roger Ailes, Fox News, is the new head of a party, and Fox News has fundamentally staffed the government, these many years later. But you have all these people who were supposedly serious journalists, independent voices that, were conservative in their strength, sitting there in the months after the McCain campaign ends, talking about Sarah Palin as a serious future presidential candidate. They engaged in the pretend with it, and all of it takes off from there. Mitt Romney going to get Trump's endorsement in 2012. Trump was a buffoon. You lived in New York. I grew up in New Jersey. No one wanted Trump's endorsement for any serious purpose. What Trump did was tap into this racist current in the party on the birther strain, and John McCain was appalled by it and condemned it, and Mitt Romney tried to exploit it. And so everybody made their accommodations one step at a time over many, many, many years. And I literally, you could unpack 16 years of comments of mine without contradiction, right? From the first instance, going back to, and my attitude on this was always, she failed at a performance level, at a character level. She was a terrible pick, but there was no unfairness against her. There's no conspiracy against her. There was a conspiracy of stupidity that erupted after the fact in defense of her. And so we have journeyed many miles down the proverbial river over this last 2 decades to this moment where we are now. But we'll always be bound up by this. And all you did, you were the third major anchor, right, to interview her. But you were the one who asked questions that revealed an aspect of her character that people are still talking about, 20 years later, basically. And the last thing I'll say about it is there's so few of those types of interviews that are so necessary for the American people to see, that take place at all. I mean, I think I could count on my hand, right, the number of interviews that Trump has had that have had been deeply revealing interviews.
It's interesting, Steve, because I was thinking about Bill Kristol the other day, and he was, I think about him a lot because I read the Bulwark and what they're doing, and he was one of Sarah Palin's early supporters. I remember reading that he was really taken by her, and I wonder how you think the Tea Party movement led to the MAGA movement, because I think there is a pretty direct line, is there not, from what was happening in that 2008 campaign and Donald Trump sort of taking the mantle of this disenfranchised, grievance-ridden party, section of the party.
So let's take a leap forward from 2008 to 2016. And the craziest answer that anybody gives to a question is Jeb Bush. Now, think about this, right? Whole campaign, Donald Trump in it, gold medal winner, craziest answer to a question. Jeb Bush gets it, keeps it for all time. I'm going to tell you what it is. But even before we get there, think about how insane it seems. Like, Jeb Bush looked into the mirror and came away with the conclusion that there's going to be a third member of the Bush family that was elected to office of the President of the United States. That his father was on a national ticket in 80, and 84, and 88, and 92, and then his brother in 2000 and 2004, and he was going to be on a national ticket in 2016. It's extraordinary hubris. It was rejected by the country, right, at a fundamental level. We don't talk about this with regard to Secretary Clinton, and that was an aspect of it. Are we really going to elect somebody's spouse after they had been president for 8 years, or somebody's brother? But at any rate, Jeb Bush is asked a question, knowing then what we know now: would we have invaded Iraq again? And Jeb Bush answers, he says, oh, yes, absolutely. The world is much safer. And Trump looked at him and was basically like, you are nuts. And that's dishonest. And so you have Trump on a constant basis finds himself in situations as the world's most prolific liar, and I mean that literally, where in politics, he's viewed in these exchanges as the more honest of the candidates. So the Tea Party movement embraced this noxious, birther, racist lie and has all of these toxic elements. But the Democrats have never been able to comprehend, though they're going to in this next election, that the Tea Party movement at its core was a reaction to the Bush presidency. It was a reaction to the spending. It was a reaction to the bailouts. It was a reaction to the lost wars. And so what Trump did is burn down an institution that the grassroots of the party felt had been betrayed by the weakness of its elected leaders. And so in 2009, the Republican Party is in the position the Democrats are now. They are in the minority in the Senate, in the minority in the House. And what happens? The locus of the party moves to a television studio. And Roger Ailes is the most powerful person politically in the country. Every single Republican that today is terrified of Trump was terrified of Ailes until Trump steamrolled Ailes. Roger Ailes made a move on Donald Trump during that campaign in 2016 after Donald Trump had said Megyn Kelly was bleeding out of her eyes. And Roger Ailes had basically said, well, that's enough. We're not going to tolerate that. We're not going to let one of our stars be abused by this guy. He's made a run. So this is New York politics, mob boss on mob boss, so to speak. And Roger Ailes proverbially wound up like Castellano outside a Spark Steakhouse with the proverbial Trump sitting in the car with Sammy the Bull next to him. And that's what happened. And so you have the fusion of the party and the network into what I would argue now. I mean, there's no real debate about this in my mind anymore. It's, every time we might have talked about this once, that I've used the word fascist, it's always with some trepidation because I want to be precise, don't want to be hyperbolic. I want to be precise and impactful in my use of language. And he is a fascist, and I've been right about that. And so we've gone on a long journey over 17 years from that moment to this moment, and it's all deeply connected together.
Yeah, you and I had a pretty dark conversation election night, and I'm just curious now, 6 months later, is it worse than you ever believed it would be, Steve? Or did you predict this?
I predicted it. I predicted the violence before the 2020 election. I predicted that Trump could be the nominee from the moment he came down the escalator. I predicted it spot on, but predicting it and knowing it is different than experiencing it. And so what you realize when you're experiencing this and you're seeing masked federal Gestapo, and that's what it is, purposeful use of these masks to instill fear amongst the people and the government of the people, by the people, for the people. The consequences of what Joe Biden did and a small team of people around him have been profound. The people who got online to be in support of that delusion did a tremendous amount of damage. It predicted it all. But, there's a saying, the years are long, the days are long, but the years are short. And so there's a lot of long days right now. And what you realize is that we grew up certainly during times of momentous events. You were on the air during September 11th. World War II, when we've experienced it in 3-hour movies. And we always know how it's going to end. But in 1939 in London, or 1940 or 1941, the days were the same length they are today. And you don't know what's going to happen next. But I have a lot of faith that, knowing the history of the country, that the country's very resilient. The American people are slow to anger and slow to rise, but are not inclined to tolerate the things that we're seeing happen. And I think it'll be massively repudiated in the end. I think it's going to be a period of renewal that follows this, that is pretty profound, right?
Yeah.
Pretty important. And there's a big fight coming in the country, and it's going to be exciting to be part of it.
Somebody named Deborah Johnson just commented, what did Steve say about Biden? And it did want me to dig into Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book with you. You know, it has been, controversial to say the least. I interviewed them, I guess it was last week or the week before in Washington. And a lot of people were very angry at them for writing this book. I know it's been actually, I think, exploited by right-wing media in a way that I don't think they intended. But what did you think of the book? What do you think of exploring and examining this inner circle and President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden and their decision to stay in the race? And do you think there's room to legitimately analyze and even criticize their actions?
Oh, I think that what they did is 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 what
Somebody
they
just
did.
wrote bad timing, Tapper, dumbass. That's the kind
Well,
of comments that I've been seeing a
what I
lot.
would say, what I would say. Well, let me. You had an incapacitated president.
I think that's being a little hyperbolic, Steve.
President's advisors quoted in this said, "President's not ready to function at 2 a.m."
Well, that's true. I don't know.
President was not
Incapacitated. I would
prepared.
say limited.
Let me. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson allege of conspiracy. There was no conspiracy, right? Excuse me. They allege a cover up, right? There was no cover up because everything happened in plain sight. And it was patently obvious. I saw it. Dean Phillips saw it.
George Clooney saw it.
The Democratic members of Congress saw it. And so what Jake Tapper details are the extraordinary actions of 5 people who put themselves and their power and Biden's ambition for more, his wife's ambition for more ahead of the country. And they created a disastrous situation. Joe Biden promised to be a transitional president and implied strongly he would serve 1 term. From the get-go, they used Trump as the rationale for Biden to break that promise under the delusion that only Biden could beat Trump, when in fact, Biden was probably the only Democrat who could lose to Trump. And the people that are responsible for that are Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti and Jill Biden and Anita Dunn and her husband. The president was manipulated. He wasn't shown the poll numbers. He didn't know what his standing was in the race. He didn't know that he was never ahead, not for a day. Those people lied to the Democratic Party. They lied to the American people. And over again, they said that they were ahead, and they were not. And so what happened in the election was the most prolific liar and the most dangerous man in American history was elected narrowly because he was viewed as more honest about Biden's health and fitness, about the border, and about the economy. And so the Democrats shouted down anybody that told the truth about this, me included. And they assassinated their characters. And they canceled the New Hampshire primary. All of it in a nakedly blatant partisan attempt to put his interests ahead of the country's at an existential moment. And the country repudiated it. And any person who was materially involved in it, who thinks that they're going to be on the ticket in 2028, or that, in Chuck Schumer's words, we just move forward, and that there's no accounting for that, Donald Trump, as bad as he is doing and the terrible things he's doing, is far more popular than the Democratic Party. Why? The brand is shattered. It's broken because of the gaslighting and because of the lie. But the omission in the Tapper book is the media role. And so you have someone like Joe Scarborough, who's on the record saying, every single person who comes on my show says one thing on camera and something else off camera. What they said on camera was this was the best Biden ever. And what they said off camera is, I can't believe he's running again. So there was a conversation that took place off camera between the most powerful people in the country and the media, and another one that took place off camera that the American people didn't get to see.
I
So
think it
then a
was
little
really,
bit
I think
later
it was,
on,
I was going to say, Steve, I think it was really uncomfortable for a lot of journalists to, I'm not justifying it, but I think, you know, people forget journalists are human beings. And I think it was very uncomfortable for them to question Joe Biden's mental acuity or decline. And I think it's sort of like asking your father to give you the car keys, right? And then when any suggestion was made, like David Axelrod, right, was one of those people who spoke pretty openly about this. George Clooney, as someone just said, they would get so pummeled. But I think you're right. I'm not, as I said, I'm not justifying it. I think there should have been more focus. And I asked Jake when I interviewed him, do you think the fact that Fox News was sort of mocking and belittling and kind of very cruelly, and one might argue how people treat Trump in that way too, but how they were cruelly portraying Joe Biden as tripping and losing, you know, his way on a stage or falling off tripping on something, that it almost something internally made you discount it in a way. I thought that was sort of interesting because I think sometimes we forget about sort of the human emotional impact that sometimes these issues have on reporters.
Well, listen, we have in this country a total collapse of trust in the media. It's so bad that your average person doesn't believe it's possible to know what's real by consuming it, right? So we live in a country fundamentally where, right, there is no reality anymore. There's been a battle that's gone on in this space between the lie and the truth. It's wrestling out there. And, the lie is prevailing in a lot of ways. But Fox is extreme and dishonest. Scott Jennings works for CNN. How did we get here? So Jake Tapper's not going to talk about the CNN fight music before the Trump town hall, before the glorification of Trump, right? The entire premise of the New York Times coverage has been that Maggie Haberman is an exceptional reporter, uniquely positioned, a Trump whisperer, entire millions of dollars of brand campaigns, alone she can interpret. And in the end, I guess they missed the lead, which is that he's a pretty dangerous fascist, which some of us have seen coming for a long time. And so in the end, everything that I said that would happen if Biden ran for a second term happened. I said it in 21. I said it in 22. And a lot of people have been brutalized by lying by powerful interests in the party, right? The media tells the country that the two parties have nothing in common. They have something in common. Yet 85% of the country looked at a Biden-Trump rematch and said, we don't want it. And the leadership of the two major parties was, well, that's the choice you're going to get. And it created a disaster. And so what I would say to some people that are out there whether it's Cheryl, you were a Republican, and I don't know Cheryl, an apology for being a Republican, a party that I left in 2018 on a matter of integrity and conviction because the party left me on these core issues. But in a two-party system, what party is it that Trump beat? And why did they beat it? Why did so many people who voted for Barack Obama suddenly turn racist and vote for Trump? Right, in the estimation of so many of the leading experts of the Democratic Party. So we have a situation where we're approaching the last chance elections.
Can
Or
I
into
ask
the
you,
abyss we go.
before we talk about the future, I just want to ask you one more question about the whole Biden sort of reevaluation. Do you think if Joe Biden had, in fact, as he said, I'm going to be a bridge to a new generation of leaders, and had made clear, maybe halfway through his presidency, granted he would have been a lame duck, and said, I'm not going to run, and a primary process could have happened, Steve, and the American people, even if they didn't know some of these names, could have, through a series of debates and public appearances, et cetera, been exposed to a new slate of candidates. Do you think, and again, this is pure speculation, that Donald Trump would have been defeated by whoever emerged as the strongest candidate in that process?
Absolutely. Donald Trump was a historically weak candidate who beat the only Democrat that he could beat, and that was Biden. And I think Vice President Harris deserves a great deal of credit. I think she performed at the highest conceivable level that she's able to perform at in a political campaign with a terrible hand of cards. But every person around Biden saw the diminished capacity, and every person who said, hey, he ought to be president till he's 86, who was reckless, and it has opened the gates to the gravest threat the country faces since the Civil War. And so now, right, the idea that those same people who shouted everybody down get to say now, conversation's over, we'll tell you who's going to run next time. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so there are some great young Democrats who have no attachment to this, who are unencumbered, untainted by it, did not gaslight the country. And those are the people that are the future of the Democratic Party, not the people that are part of this.
Who are some of the people who you're looking at in terms of 2028? I know that Pete Buttigieg just announced he's not going to run for Senate, so he can focus on potentially running for president in 2028. Are there other candidates on the horizon that give you real hope?
I look at somebody. So first off, I think we have to reject the idea as a first principle that the predicate to be elected president requires you to serve in the Senate or as governor. This has not served the country well. This graduate school approach that you want to get into Harvard Law, well, you got to go to Harvard and then to, the right high school nonsense. So in the Biden episode, against the entirety of the elected leadership of the Democratic Party, people who showed real integrity and real character start with George Clooney. I start with Dean Phillips. Now, when I look at somebody who was on my program, and I asked him a question, I said, if you were president, what would you do? Jake Auchincloss, who is a congressman, a Rhodes Scholar, and a Marine officer, knows exactly what he would want to do as president. AOC has a 30% national approval level. 30%. If she gets that up, she could be a formidable candidate. She could be a formidable candidate in the Democratic primary. But is somebody with a 30% approval level going to be the person to lead the party out of the wilderness? Is the country that's trying to say something to Democrats looking for a socialist from the Bronx in New York? So J.B. Pritzker, Wes Moore, Josh Shapiro, the governors. Gavin Newsom put himself into position as being one of the chief gaslighters for Joe Biden. And Gavin Newsom's position on this was, hey, I was loyal to Biden, and that's what matters. You weren't loyal to the country when it mattered, right? And you lost your credibility. And so in order to beat Trump, it requires the ability to be honest and tell the truth about the orgy of corruption going on. When Chuck Schumer comes out and he says, after Menendez is arrested with the gold bars in his jacket, that, hey, Menendez was a great public servant for the people in New Jersey, right? So what we have is a sort of tribal warfare between these D people and the R people. And none of the people who are with us, by the way, are invited to any of these rooms, right? They're not represented. And so they deserve to be told the truth. And when you look at the Jake Tapper book, the fundamental mistruth of the Tapper book is that Tapper says, well, this is worse than Watergate, which I guess makes him Bob Woodward, except for there was no cover-up because everything that happened in plain sight. There was a conspiracy of people strong-arming any dissent and cracking down on the statement of obvious. So all the Democrats who looked at Donald Trump and the Republicans with total disdain, and I didn't stay in line, I got out of line. So the day that Trump came down the escalator, when I denounced him, every single Republican was with me. When I look around from every person I ever worked with for my entire career, the Republican Party, all of them, thousands of people. There's like 4 or 5 left.
Do you,
right? There's
do you
4
think
or 5 left. And the Democrats watching that did the same exact thing with Biden. They all got online with something they knew was absurd and delusional. And
Thank you, Winter Brightly. Let Katie speak. No, I catch your point. And speaking of moving forward, Steve, do you think we're hearing rumblings by Republicans about the budget bill? Josh Hawley and Susan Collins and Rand Paul is worried about the deficit. And then there's this little known part. I was just talking to Joyce Vance about this hidden provision that says that it will limit the judiciary's ability to use contempt of court rulings to actually force an issue on anyone, including perhaps the president of the United States. Do you think that bill is going to pass? And do you think any Republicans are going to grow a pair finally?
I don't know, but I would. It's astonishing to conceive of the question, and let's use Rand Paul as the specific example. And so, however long Rand Paul's been around now, right? What's the shtick? Right? I'm a constitutionalist, the Bill of Rights, spending. So I'm a moderate Republican, always have been, which means, right, the moderate Republican, by past definition, is the most fiscally conservative person in the country. So I like the spending restraint as an argument. It's why I was a Republican. So here's the difference between a million and a billion and a trillion. So you can understand the $5 trillion debt that they're talking about adding in this bill. If I say to you, Katie, we'll meet up in a million seconds. That's in 12 days. If I say let's meet up in a billion seconds, we will see each other in 33 years. If I say we will meet up in a trillion seconds, that's in 33,000 years. That's the difference.
Okay, Steve, when did you spend the time figuring that out?
That's the difference between a billion and a trillion. And they're adding 5 trillion of debt. Never before has so much been taken from so many by so few with so much. And if you care about the idea that we shouldn't completely bankrupt the country for our kids, if that strikes you as a moral chord, right? That like when you die at a personal level, right? Am I going to leave my kids a giant mountain of credit card debt? The amount of stealing from our kids' future with this piece of legislation, there's never been anything like it. It's the most corrupt single piece of legislation in the history of the American Republic in 250 years. Any person who has any attachment whatsoever to like a conservative principle, one thin thread of attachment left, right, to the size of government, right, to restraint, to fiscal order and management, cannot conceivably consider voting for this, but they will because it's a rubber stamp and it's a Politburo, and it's extraordinary to watch it all unfold. And
you think it'll be stopped? Do you think it'll be stopped, Steve?
I think I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, I still don't understand how, look, 3 years ago, I said Marco Rubio is the type of guy in 1959 in Cuba, he would have been carrying Castro's coat, which is exactly what he turned out doing, except Castro's Trump. He got 99 votes in the Democratic Senate. Pete Hegseth got confirmed. Tulsi Gabbard got confirmed. Robert Kennedy got confirmed. It's astonishing. So if those people could get confirmed, is it possible that bill could pass? It is possible. But what it will do is trigger a level of pain and suffering, collapse of rural health services and hospitals, a great taking of public lands.
Food for kids, food for hungry kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's terrible, and it's going to be real devastating. And the problem politically is still, right? You have to win an election, and the Democratic Party, because it's anchored to this Biden insanity, can't move on.
Well, maybe they will. Maybe they can. Maybe some of.
And so that's the question. You have to be able to win. You have to have credibility.
Hey, Steve, before we go, it's interesting. I was watching something somewhere. I watch so much and read so much. I don't even remember, but there's this guy named Lawrence Britt, and apparently this poster was available at the Holocaust Museum. But it was the early warning signs of fascism. I'm sure you've seen this. This was written in 2003. This Lawrence Britt wrote it after researching 7 fascist regimes: Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, Franco's Spain, Salazar's Portugal, Papadopoulos's Greece, and Pinochet's Chile, Suharto's Indonesia. So here are the warning signs. And I just want to go down really quickly and just give me a yes or no with a short statement about each of them. Powerful and continuing nationalism.
Yes, absolutely.
Disdain for human rights.
100%.
Identification of enemies as a unifying cause.
You bet.
Who are the enemies, Steve?
Trump talks about the ubiquitous they all the time. There's always a they. And the they is a phantom, an amorphous ghost that transit the corporate space, the media space. Anybody who is opposed to Trump is a part of the insidious they and to be targeted. And you hear the words that he uses, that people are scum, or they're sick, or they're deranged, or they're nasty, that every criticism results in a full-on character attack. For example, Scott Pelley. If you tell the truth, you are attacked, because in the end, right, this is a fear-based system, and truth tellers require fearlessness. And so the truth and fearlessness are always married in a way that's a threat to the fascists.
Yeah, and I think the vilification of DEI is another way of weaponizing or demonizing people of color, trans people, anyone who and may not be a white person in America, or white Christian person in America. All right, supremacy of the military.
Absolutely. Kim Jong-un parade on the June 14th, 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. Greatest desecration in the history of the U.S. Armed Forces. 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, the Trump parade. It's disgraceful.
So it's so gross. And I can't believe, I guess they have no choice, huh? They have to do it.
He's the commander. He's the commander in chief, and he wants his parade. And
isn't it going to cost $250 million?
I'm sure. And by the way, in my entire government career, anytime that anybody throws out a number of what it's going to cost, it has never one time ever cost less than that amount. It always costs 40% more, 100% of the time.
Rampant sexism.
Absolutely.
Controlled mass media. Hello. Okay. Obsession with national security.
Yep.
Religion and government intertwined, what we just are seeing in Oklahoma, for example.
You just saw Pete Hegseth conduct a fundamentalist religious service at the Pentagon.
Wasn't that crazy?
And it is unconstitutional, it is inappropriate, and it is no good. Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, let me just read. There are only 6 more. Corporate power protected.
Yep.
Labor power suppressed.
Yep.
Disdain for intellectuals and the arts.
Big time.
Look at the Kennedy Center. Obsession with crime and punishment.
Yep.
Rampant cronyism and corruption. Check. Fraudulent elections. I thought that was interesting.
Yep. Yeah. Perception's reality. I mean, it doesn't have to be a fraudulent election, but listen, the original sin in all of this isn't what the people around Biden did. It's about the fact that you had a guy who lied about the results of a presidential election and somehow was able to overpower the society's truth tellers with the lie and convince half the country that an American presidential election that was free and fair and nearly pristine was not. One of the great tragedies in the history of the country.
So I want to go back to your earlier thing, just to close things out and to make people feel less depressed. You said there is going to be, what did you say? There's going to be a reckoning, right? I think you said that.
Yeah.
And that these things will not stand, in essence. Why are you so confident of that, Steve?
I believe in America. I have faith in the country. I have faith in the American people. And I understand how it is that Trump won. And there's been a terrible cost to the politics of self-interest. And what I want to say, to everybody who's making comments, I appreciate you so much getting on, taking time out of your day. And I want to do everything I can to try to persuade you of something in the next minute, which is that the most powerful people in the world are not owed your fandom. They're not owed your fandom. Stop being a fan. Be a citizen. And if you read the Jake Tapper book about the specifics of what people did, and I've been very critical about the book, about the omissions, about someone like Joe Scarborough who told his audience, F you if you don't believe it's the best Biden ever. Right? All of this dishonesty. We paid a terrible price for it, and that price is Donald Trump. And the idea that there's a good party and an evil MAGA party is not true. There is two dishonest parties, and the person who is the demagogue with a preternatural ability to lie and to grift is the person in a contest of dishonesty that prevailed. And the answer to get out of this is to be for better. And so there has always been moments of crisis and doubt around the 50th anniversaries of our independence. It was true at the 50th anniversary, and it's true at the 250th anniversary. And so the country came within 30 seconds of not surviving at Gettysburg. And the moment requires a lot of confrontation right now with some terrible ideas from a place of conviction, and integrity, and a recognition that what Donald Trump is smashing doesn't snap back into being when it's all over. But do we want to live in a country where we got guys with masks running around with FBI jackets, snatching people off of the streets, spreading fear? And the answer to that is absolutely not. And so what do we gotta do? What we have to do is we have to let go of the past, and specifically 15 to 20 people who were the architects of the political strategy that led to this catastrophe. That's what an opposition has to do. And so all over the country, right? If you're thinking of running for office, run for Congress, run for the state legislature. I think that there's going to be a civic awakening after this, right? But the idea that you can only see the dishonesty when it's committed by the other party and not inside your own. What Donald Trump has served to power on is hypocrisy. Because the one thing Trump is not a hypocrite. He's utterly transparent. He revels in his scumbaggery. He doesn't try to hide it. Trump's never ran as a good guy. He's run as a tough guy, a punisher for the people that ordinary people in this country feel so aggrieved at. He is the demagogue that the founders worried about and warned about from the very beginning. He came to be. If George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were here, right? If all the founders were here and we got 10 minutes with them, right? And we had to tell them, right, what happened, how it work out. I mean, we would definitely want to show them the flag on the moon, right? I would definitely want to show them Barack Obama's picture, right? And then I would want to talk to them about not the things that they didn't see, but that they would understand pretty quickly how they came to be on a straight line from the vision and how it expanded. I think they'd get that right away. But the thing I'd want to talk to them about is that the demagogue that they saw in the 1780s Cleon was the Athenian demagogue. That's who they were worried about. He's here. He rose. In over 10 years' time, beginning with one chant that was lock her up. I remember being on TV at the time. I said, oh boy, banana republicanism, but that's fascism. And so how did he get there? One step at a time, one day at a time. And how are we going to recover out of this? One step at a time, one day at a time. But the American people are going to have to make a decision, right? And they're going to get a vote. We get a vote in 2 years' time to either say, we want a group of people around Trump to tell him yes to everything he wants to do, or we want to check around this guy. And that's the question in 2026.
Steve, I love talking to you.
And I love talking to you, Katie.
Anyway, thank you guys for watching. We've taken up a lot of time. I've heard that these conversations are both supposed to be 15 to 30 minutes, but I can't do that with Steve, you guys. We usually go on and on. But Steve, take care. Let's talk again soon.
You bet.
You're the best.
Good to see you. Bye.
Good to see you. Bye, everyone.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning. I invite you to join this community where I promise to be honest, blunt, and direct about what is happening in this country. America is in crisis. Follow and subscribe to this channel and on Substack. Thank you.